"I am not going to support a lazy, overweight woman like you," my husband screamed, unaware that I had just inherited millions of dollars and was the new owner of the corporation where he worked. That was the moment I made my decision. "You disgust me. You don't even look like a wife. You look like a burden." The words cut across the dining room like a dull, rusty knife, the kind that doesn't slice instantly, but leaves a jagged, infected wound of shame. Aisha Holloway did not respond. She couldn't. Her lips were sealed by the trembling of her pride and the long habit of silence. She sat with her back straight, her gaze fixed downward, watching the mashed potatoes cool on her plate. Across from her, Marcus Sterling, her husband of 12 years, finished pouring himself a glass of red wine with an arrogance that was audible even in the clink of the glass against the table. Aisha was 38 years old, but she felt twice that. Her face, still beautiful in the warm glow of the dining room light, was etched with tiny lines that came not from time, but from relentless pain. She had become a mother at 26. Her son, Ezra, was born with mild cerebral palsy, requiring constant care, ongoing therapy, medication, and so much love. Aisha had thrown herself into that role with her entire being, setting aside her own dreams, her degree in business administration, her youth, her friends, movie nights, her freedom. Her mother, Gwendolyn, whom everyone called Gwen, watched silently from her wheelchair in the corner. Gwen was 66, her expression marked by years of struggle, poverty, and wounded pride. She had never liked Marcus, but over time, she too had learned to be silent. "The same thing again," Marcus declared, wiping his mouth with a napkin that he carelessly tossed onto his plate. "Every single day, the same thing. Bland mashed potatoes, boiled meat, and that expression on your face like you're playing the victim." Aisha swallowed. The knot in her throat hurt more than any physical blow. She glanced at Ezra, who was in his specialized chair, playing quietly with one of his sensory toys. At 11 years old, Ezra didn't speak much, but he understood. She knew it. He felt every shout, every slight. "I am tired. Do you hear me?" Marcus stared at her, his eyes shining with fury. "Tired of supporting a woman who can't even warm up a plate of food. Tired of coming home from the office to see this house in a mess. Tired of a mother in a wheelchair who isn't even my mother." "Stop it, Marcus!" Aisha suddenly yelled, so loud that Ezra dropped his toy. Marcus looked surprised, not with fear, but with mockery. "Well, look who woke up. The dead woman has risen." Gwen raised a trembling hand. "Not in front of the child, please." "And why not, Gwen?" Marcus stood up, leaning his hands on the table. "Do you want me to keep playing the role of the understanding husband, the hero? You know what they say about me at work? That I'm some poor sap who has to rush home to take care of a dysfunctional family. I'm fed up with it." Aisha stood up too. The mashed potatoes remained untouched, a soft, gray, shapeless metaphor for her life. "If your family is such a source of shame for you, then nobody is forcing you to stay. And who is going to support this house, huh? You? The disabled mother? The special needs kid? Don't make me laugh." A heavy silence fell over the room. Gwen pressed her lips together until they disappeared. Ezra began to cry silently, large, hot tears running down his cheeks, uncontrolled. At that moment, Aisha's cell phone vibrated on the table. She grabbed it almost instinctively, grateful for any excuse to escape the inferno. It was an unknown number. She hesitated for a second, then answered. "Yes?" A man's voice, measured and formal, spoke. "Is this Ms. Aisha Holloway?" "Yes, this is she. I'm calling on behalf of the law firm of Sterling and Associates. We need you to come in first thing tomorrow morning. It concerns the testamentary succession of Mr. Elias Vance." Aisha frowned. "There must be a mistake. I don't know any Elias Vance." "Sir Vance legally recognized you as his daughter before his passing. You have been designated as the sole heir to his entire estate." Aisha went blank. Marcus was still yelling in the background, but she could no longer hear the words. She only heard a buzzing, an electric current running through her body. Her mother, Gwen, looked at her intently. Her eyes said what her lips could not. "It's true." Aisha hung up the phone. "So, what's happening now?" Marcus asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Did they call to offer you a job as a professional dishwasher?" Aisha looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. She didn't answer. She sat back down. "Who was it?" Gwen asked, her voice raspy. "A lawyer. They say I inherited something. Something big." "From who?" "From Elias Vance." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "The owner of Vance Holdings? The old millionaire who was in the news a few days ago for dying alone?" Aisha nodded silently. "And what does he have to do with you?" "That's what I'm wondering." Gwen lowered her gaze. A slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. "Mom, do you know something?" "This isn't the time." "Yes, it is!" Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Is someone going to explain what is going on?" Ezra began to cough, choking on his own tears. Aisha rushed to him, holding him tightly, cradling him against her chest. "It's okay, my love. Mama is here. Mama isn't going anywhere." Marcus picked up his plate and smashed it on the floor. "I'm sick of this, tired of this farce, of this house, of this life. I am not going to support a lazy, overweight woman like you." The silence was immediate, heavy, absolute. Aisha turned around slowly. Gwen was breathing heavily. Ezra looked at his mother as if waiting for something, a word, a gesture, a sign. But Aisha only smiled, a small, tiny curve of the lips that no one understood, but that changed everything. "You're right," she said without emotion. "You won't have to support me anymore." Marcus blinked. "What did you say?" "I'm leaving tomorrow. You can keep your food, your ego, and your silence." "Where do you think you're going?" Aisha looked at her mother, then at her son. "Somewhere I can breathe." And without another word, she picked Ezra up and carried him upstairs. Marcus stood there with the broken plate scattered on the floor, the wine spilled on the tablecloth, and a silence that, for the first time, did not obey him. Gwen looked at him from the corner. "I swear, one day you're going to pay for all of this," he scoffed. "Now you too? You're all crazy in this house." She turned her head toward the window. The neighborhood lights flickered. Somewhere the city was still alive, oblivious to the daily tragedy unfolding in that house. Upstairs, Aisha was packing a duffel bag with Ezra's clothes, medical papers, and her old college notebook. Deep in the closet, she found a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were her certifications, her business degree diploma, letters she never sent, her first perfume, and a crumpled photo of Jamal, her childhood friend and secret love. She traced the image with her fingers. She did not cry. She wasn't broken. She was waking up. Downstairs, Marcus lit another cigarette. He didn't know he had just signed his own sentence. He didn't know the woman he had scorned now owned the empire where he thought he was in charge. And for the first time in a long time, she had a plan. She didn't sleep that night. While the world around her sank into darkness, Aisha prepared the essentials. Ezra's medical documents, her university transcript, the old planner where she once scribbled her dreams, the same dreams she'd put on hold since motherhood, marriage, and reality chained her to a life she hadn't chosen. At 5 o'clock in the morning, without making a sound, she walked down the stairs with a suitcase in each hand and Ezra asleep in her arms. Her mother was waiting by the front door in silence, a blanket over her legs and her eyes wet. Aisha nodded. Gwen knew it was time. They called a cab using a ride-sharing app, and when the car pulled up in front of the house, they didn't look back. Marcus was sleeping soundly with the TV on, an empty wine bottle beside the bed, and the false certainty that he had won. He didn't know that the only thing he had lost that night was the only thing that had ever truly held him up. Aisha rented a small, simple but clean apartment in a modest complex on the city's outskirts. 3 narrow rooms, a bathroom without hot water, damp walls, but a window from which she could see a piece of the sky, unobstructed by power lines. It was enough. Gwen was the first to break the silence. "Are you going to tell me what that Elias Vance has to do with you?" Aisha looked at her from the frame of the kitchen, where she was heating some water to prepare formula for Ezra. Is it true? Is what the lawyer said true? Gwen lowered her gaze. The trembling in her hands was not from the cold. I was very young, 19 years old. I was working as a secretary in an office. Your biological father was the owner of that company. His name was Elias. He was married, and I was a fool. A chill ran down Aisha's spine. He abandoned me. He asked me to have an abortion. I refused. He fired me. He never looked for me again, but his wife died years later, and it seems guilt brought him remorse. He investigated, found you, and legally recognized you just recently. He didn't want you to know while he was alive, which is why his will is so peculiar. Aisha closed her eyes for a moment. Her real father was a millionaire, one of the richest men in the country, the owner of Vance Holdings. The name now carried a different weight. Vance Holdings was a technology and infrastructure conglomerate with hundreds of employees, government contracts, and offices in several states, a powerhouse. And now, according to that lawyer, she was the sole heir. But it wasn't the wealth that kept her awake. It was the fact that Marcus worked there, in the very empire she had just inherited. Over the next few weeks, Aisha moved in silence. She started therapy with a psychologist named Dr. Lena Baker, a specialist in emotional abuse survivors. She exercised at home, ate better. She learned to breathe before answering, to say no without fear, to look at her reflection without shame. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy. But with every passing day, the face looking back at her was more her own, less molded by Marcus. Ezra was enrolled in a new, specialized pediatric therapy center. Thanks to the inherited resources, she could pay for his sessions without depending on anyone. His smile improved. He began making sounds he hadn't made in years. Although he couldn't articulate full words, every time he looked at his mother, his eyes spoke what his mouth could not. "Thank you." Gwen, in her chair beside the window, knitted silently. She no longer needed to talk. She knew the change was happening, and it was real. One morning, the Vance Holdings lawyer sent a package by courier. Inside were legal documents, deeds, partnership shares, and a handwritten letter signed by Elias Vance. "I failed you as a father, but I return the power that was always yours. Not for you to forgive me, but for you to decide what to do with my name." Aisha didn't cry. She didn't feel nostalgia. She felt direction. She requested a meeting with the Vance Holdings executives. It was Jamal who arranged the meeting. Jamal, her childhood friend, the only one who hadn't disappeared when things got hard, showed up at the apartment door with a box of fresh fruit and a nervous smile. "Can I come in?" Aisha let him in without saying anything. "I heard about Elias," he said. "I found out from a colleague. Vance had a secret daughter, an heir. When I heard your name, I couldn't believe it." "Well, now you know. What do you think I should do?" "What no one ever did for me. Find justice." Jamal was a financial analyst, but he was also an honest, loyal man, one who never got tangled in the mud, even when everyone around him did. He was the one who revealed that Marcus worked in the projects division, was quickly climbing the ranks, and was rumored to be considered for operations management, a role with access to multi-million-dollar contracts. This was all thanks to inflated reports, data manipulation, and an enviable skill for pretending to know more than he actually did. "And something else. He's having an affair with Chloe," Jamal said, looking at the floor. "She's new, a recent grad, pretty, smart. She spends a lot of time in his office." Aisha didn't blink. "Since when?" "About 6 months, maybe more. And how do you know?" "I saw photos, heard conversations. I heard him bragging at a meeting. He boasts about what he has, about what's lacking at home. He calls you a burden, a liability." Aisha clenched her fists, not from rage, but from a surge of strength. "I want to get into the company, not as president, not yet. I want to see who's who from the bottom. I want to meet the people who work there, the ones Marcus steps on, the ones nobody sees." Jamal helped her arrange discreet visits. She introduced herself as an external consultant in personnel evaluation under an alternative name. She went to the central headquarters, walked through offices, and spoke with cleaning staff, technicians, and receptionists. Nobody knew who she really was, not even Chloe Jenkins, who greeted her with a polite smile, unaware she had the man's lawful wife standing right in front of her. Marcus didn't see her, or if he did, he didn't recognize her. She had gained a little weight, yes, but her clothes were different. Her posture had changed. She was no longer the woman hunched over by guilt. Now she was a confident figure of measured words and heavy silences. On her second visit, an employee led her to the projects division. Marcus was there, explaining on a whiteboard a supposed material saving that no one understood, but everyone pretended to grasp. As you can see, he was saying, we managed to reduce concrete expenditure by 27%, thanks to an intelligent redistribution of the foundations. We are pure efficiency. Aisha stayed in the shadows behind a column, watching. She listened to him talk. He used bombastic words, confusing statistics, a condescending tone. He felt powerful. An executive, Director Mark Harrison, recognized her, not by her face, but by the name on her security badge. "Excuse me, are you the new president?" "Not yet," Aisha replied. "For now, I'm just an observer." Harrison swallowed, understood, and said nothing more. At the end of the day, Aisha was invited to an internal performance review meeting. Jamal accompanied her. She sat in the back, behind polarized glass in an adjoining conference room. Nobody knew she was there. Marcus entered first. He wore an expensive suit, strong cologne, and a rehearsed smile. He greeted several people with backslaps, empty laughs, and false promises. "Today we are going to present the quarterly results," he said, connecting his laptop to the projector. "I think everyone will be impressed." Aisha watched him silently. What she felt wasn't rage. It was pity, because everything he believed he had wasn't his. It was borrowed, stolen, faked. While Marcus spoke, Aisha opened her notebook and wrote a single sentence. "He has no idea." And she smiled, not with mockery, but with certainty, because in that moment she understood that true power wasn't in yelling or slamming the table or humiliating. True power was knowing who you are and who you never need to be again. Aisha closed her notebook firmly. The murmur of the meeting continued behind the polarized glass as Marcus, with his fake charisma, continued to show off to the executives, unaware that his days were numbered. She didn't need to interrupt. She didn't need to humiliate him in front of everyone. Not yet. She would bring him down with the same lies he had sown. She left the room without a word. Jamal followed her, a mixture of concern and pride on his face. In the elevator she didn't speak, only looked at their reflections in the steel mirror. Two figures that were once fragments and were now starting to assemble. When they reached the parking lot, she broke the silence. "I want every contract from the last 6 months reviewed. I need an internal audit team, one that isn't corrupted. Do you have someone in mind?" "Yes, and I want him to start this week. His name is Caleb." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "Caleb Reed, Ms. Eleanor's son, the guy with Asperger's?" "Yes, I met him at the center where Ezra goes for therapy. He helped organize the therapy games. He memorized schedules, names, codes. He has a brilliant mind. They need him, even if they don't know it." Jamal didn't object. He had already learned that when Aisha made decisions like this, it was always for a deeper reason. The next day, Caleb arrived with a worn backpack, poorly stitched shoes, and a shirt that was too big. He walked with his head down, talking to himself very softly, but when he entered the office assigned to him next to Aisha, everything changed. His gaze fixed on the computer, as if it were a musical instrument, and in less than 20 minutes, he had already detected minor inconsistencies in 3 billing documents. Aisha watched him with interest as he explained his color coding system. "Every file has a pattern. When they break that pattern, I know there's an error or a lie." "And how do you distinguish one from the other?" Caleb looked directly at her as if the question needed no answer. "Lies have a smell," and he returned to his screen. In parallel, Aisha's orders began to be implemented. All administrative areas underwent cross-checks. Medical leaves, after-hours exits, and technical reports were reviewed. Marcus began to notice the change, but interpreted it as part of a typical transition process when a new president takes power. What he didn't know was that the president was already there among them, disguised as a shadow, a protocol, a familiar face that had yet to be revealed. It was Caleb who detected the first sign of serious irregularity, an email archived in a hidden folder within the shared project system. In that email, Marcus was exchanging messages with an external vendor called Crestwood Solutions, which was not listed in the official database of approved contractors. Attached were modified blueprints of public structures along with inflated expense figures. Caleb handed the information to Aisha without a word, only a small sticky note that read, "Does not match." Aisha read it and realized that Crestwood was not only a phantom supplier, it was being used to launder money. Marcus had been diverting funds for longer than she imagined. Meanwhile, Chloe continued to appear in the visitor logs to Marcus's office after hours, always after 6 in the evening, always with envelopes in hand, always with perfume so strong it lingered in the air even after she had left. Aisha watched her one of those nights from a security camera. Chloe sat on Marcus's lap. He stroked her leg. She laughed with a practiced coquetry, but her gaze occasionally seemed lost in something darker. Something didn't add up. Days later, Chloe requested a private meeting with Human Resources. She claimed stress, anxiety, morning sickness. The director of the department coldly informed Aisha. She requested a temporary leave of absence. She says she needs to have some tests done. Aisha didn't react publicly, but she called Jamal as soon as she had a moment alone. "She's pregnant." "Are you sure?" "Completely. And she's not going to say who the father is." That same night, Gwen had an episode. Aisha arrived at the apartment and found her mother semi-conscious, her breathing weak and a burning fever. They rushed her to the nearest metropolitan community hospital. The diagnosis was a respiratory infection complicated by her age and chronic condition. While the doctors stabilized her, Aisha sat next to Ezra in the waiting room. The child stroked his sensory toy, his eyes fixed on the floor. Aisha took his hand. "I promise Grandma is going to be fine." Ezra didn't answer, but he squeezed her hand tightly. Aisha couldn't help but cry. Everything she was building could collapse at any moment. Power couldn't buy time or reverse the damage accumulated by years of silence. The next morning, while Gwen slept connected to an IV, Aisha returned to the office. Caleb was waiting with another report. This time, it was a recording. "He didn't know it was on," Caleb explained, showing his voice recorder, which he used to record his disorganized thoughts. He played the audio. Marcus was talking to someone else, someone unidentified. But the tone was clear. Trading information, leaks, promises of under-the-table payments, and something more. "If the board doesn't approve my promotion, I'll do what we talked about. I have the data and a contact in the press." Aisha closed her eyes. Marcus was blackmailing the top brass. He was ready to pull the company down if he didn't get what he wanted, like a child breaking a toy when he's not allowed to keep it. Later, while Aisha was processing everything, Jamal approached with a folder. The list of employees who reported harassment in the last few months. No formal actions were taken. The victims were afraid. Regarding Marcus, there are 5 mentions of his name, all dismissed without investigation. 4 women, 1 man. Aisha swallowed hard. She knew what he was capable of. She had lived it, but reading it in the reports, feeling it so close, made her sick. That night, Jamal invited her to dinner, not at an expensive restaurant, but at a small diner across from a park. They ordered burgers and hot soup. They talked little, eating in silence until Jamal broke the wall. "Why don't you hate me?" "What makes you think I don't?" "Because you still let me be close, after what happened with Chloe." Aisha looked at him for a long time, then lowered her gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to make a mistake out of loneliness. I'm not justifying you, but I understand you. I don't want you to understand me. I want you to believe me, to believe that I care about you." Aisha didn't respond. She finished her soup in silence. The next day, Chloe appeared at a district gynecological clinic. Ezra had therapy at the same location. Aisha didn't see her, but Caleb did. He recognized her from a photo Jamal had shown him. And she wasn't alone. Jamal was with her. Caleb, unaware of the danger, took a picture with his phone and sent it to Aisha with a single word: "Today." Aisha stared at the image for several seconds. Jamal next to Chloe in a waiting room, his arm over the back of the seat, her face serious. Nothing in the photo confirmed anything, but it didn't deny it either. She stood still. She felt her entire body tense up. Chloe was pregnant. Jamal was with her. What if the child wasn't Marcus's? What if everything was more tangled than it seemed? What if the betrayal came from the person she least expected? The clock read 6 o'clock in the evening. The city lights were beginning to turn on. Aisha, looking out the window of her office at the tall city buildings, repeated a phrase she knew by heart: "The trap is set. All that's missing is for everyone to take the wrong step." Aisha placed the phone on the table. The image remained etched on her retina like an oil stain that refused to leave. Jamal in a medical waiting room next to Chloe, her belly slightly rounded, him sitting too close. Not a caress, not a smile, but the complicity was there, invisible to those who didn't know how to read glances. Aisha knew. She knew too well. The silence in the office became thick, almost physical. Caleb, at his desk, pretended to review papers, but his eyes were shaking. He had noticed the change in Aisha's expression, that sudden hardening of her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the desk. He didn't dare speak. Aisha took a deep breath. She counted to 5. Then she stood up, grabbed her purse, left the stacked documents, and walked out of the building without looking at anyone. The cold night air hit her face like a reproach. She walked 3 blocks to an empty coffee shop. She ordered a black coffee, sat at the farthest table, and contemplated the unthinkable. What if Jamal had lied? What if the child Chloe was expecting wasn't Marcus's, but his? What if the only clean man she had left was also rotten inside? It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't wounded pride. It was something else. It was the feeling that everyone she touched betrayed her. First her mother, hiding who her real father was, then Marcus, with years of humiliation. Now, perhaps, Jamal. Everyone had hurt her. Everyone except Ezra. Her phone vibrated in her purse. She checked the screen. It was the clinic. She answered immediately. "Ms. Holloway?" "Yes, tell me. You need to come in. Your son has had a respiratory crisis. He's under observation, but we need your consent to transfer him to the pediatric intensive care unit." The world shrank. She left the coffee untouched and ran to the main avenue to hail a cab. She didn't remember how she got there. She didn't remember the traffic lights or the headlights. She only remembered getting out of the car, running down the hospital corridor, opening the door to the observation area, and seeing him there, so small, with an oxygen mask, his lips purple, his body still. "Ezra," she whispered, approaching. A young doctor explained that the child had entered a state of mild hypoxia, likely due to a type of fibrosis that hadn't been detected. They performed a CAT scan, a battery of analyses, and pulmonary function tests. Aisha didn't fully understand the medical terms, but the important words were clear. Specialized care on the East Coast. Experimental treatment. Expensive. Immediate. Salvation or resignation. How much does it cost? More than can be paid without institutional support. Aisha looked him in the eye. "I can pay for it." "Are you sure?" "Don't doubt it." Ezra was stabilized, but he had to travel soon. The treatment had to start before the fibrosis advanced further. Aisha spent the night in a chair next to his bed. In the early morning, when the child opened his eyes, The first thing he said was, "Mom, why doesn't Dad love me?" The question hit her like a gunshot. Aisha froze. Ezra wasn't looking directly at her. He was looking at the ceiling, his lips dry, his voice barely audible. Aisha felt the air leave her chest. "It's not that he doesn't love you," she whispered. "It's that he doesn't know how to." "Did I do something wrong?" "No, my love. You are perfect. The problem is his, not yours." "And why doesn't he live with us?" "Because I didn't want him close. Because you and I are better off without someone hurting us." Ezra closed his eyes again. A tear slowly crossed his cheek. Aisha wiped it away with her fingers. She felt powerless, furious, hurt. The child she had defended with her whole being was now asking if he was to blame for not being loved. And all because that despicable man hadn't been capable of seeing what was right in front of him. The next morning, Gwen came to the hospital. They brought her in a wheelchair, pale, eyelids drooping, her voice hoarse. Aisha explained the situation. Gwen nodded without speaking. She was thinner. Her skin had dark spots. Coughing shook her whole body. When Ezra fell asleep, Aisha took her to the hospital cafeteria. There, while stirring sugar into a cup of tea, Gwen spoke. "You hate me for hiding it from you." Aisha didn't respond. "I understood it as soon as you said his name. I knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. He wasn't just a man. He was an entire lifetime. You took away the possibility of knowing who I was." "I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect you from turning into a copy of him." Aisha looked up. "What do you mean?" "Your father wasn't just a coward. He was cruel. He didn't just fire me. He threatened me. He told me if I spoke, he would erase my name from the world. He had contacts, money, power. You were a stain on his record, and yet he left you his fortune, because guilt is never erased. It only transforms. He gave you the money he didn't want to give you in life, but don't mistake it for love." Aisha swallowed. She had a tangle in her chest she didn't know how to undo. Gwen was trembling. Her tea splashed onto her fingers. "I don't have much time left," she whispered. "I feel it in my body, and I don't want to leave without telling you this. If you can ever choose between revenge and love, choose love. Because revenge doesn't fill you, doesn't heal you. It only delays the emptiness." Aisha looked at her for a long time. The image of Jamal returned to her mind. Chloe pregnant, the doubt, the pain, the rage. That night, upon returning to the apartment, she found an envelope under the door. It had no sender. She opened it with cold hands. Inside, photos. Marcus meeting with a group of men in a discreet office. She recognized one of them, Peter Reynolds, a former partner of Vance Holdings, expelled years ago for embezzlement. Another was a lawyer with a history of money laundering. The third, the same contact from Crestwood Solutions. Marcus was selling secrets. Marcus was allying with the company's enemies. Marcus was willing to do anything for more power. It was the next day that Caleb found the rest. On a USB drive forgotten in the printing room, recordings, notes, and a video. In it, Marcus spoke directly to the camera. "This is insurance in case they leave me out. I have copies of the bidding documents, the names of the ghost employees, the transfer dates. If they take me out of the game, we all go down." Aisha locked the USB drive in a safe. Then she locked herself in the bathroom, faced the mirror, and looked at herself for a long time. She had everything in her hands, the evidence, the power, the opportunity to destroy him, and yet something inside her trembled. She brought her hands to her face, leaned on the sink, and slowly let herself fall to the floor. She cried silently, with a sadness that came not just from the betrayal, but from the loss. Because every step toward justice took her away from something she also needed, peace. And amidst the tears, she asked herself in a low whisper, so low only her reflection heard her, "What if I become like him?" Aisha asked the question without expecting an answer, as the silence of the bathroom grew heavier than her own body curled up on the floor. Dry tears left streaks on her skin. She wasn't crying from rage. She was crying from exhaustion, from disappointment, from that strange mix of justice and guilt that gnawed at her chest. She had come so far. She had everything, and yet something was emptying her from within. She slowly stood up, washed her face with cold water, and looked at herself in the mirror again. This time, the question dissipated. She was not like him because she had the power to crush, but also the ability to decide how to use it. She didn't sleep that night. She compiled a list of dates, documents, names, and recordings. The puzzle was complete. Marcus had not only betrayed his family, he had also corrupted the place that fed hundreds of workers. He had manipulated reports, threatened employees, covered up abuse, and was now preparing to sell Vance Holdings' database to international competitors. Aisha couldn't remain silent anymore. At dawn, she assembled the company's legal team. She demanded an urgent summons for all employees and executives, a general assembly in the main auditorium, not one empty seat. What was about to happen there was not a simple announcement. It was the collapse of an empire built on lies. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the auditorium lights dimmed. More than 300 people occupied their seats, murmuring amongst themselves. No one knew for sure what was happening, but the air smelled of something imminent. The rumors were many: layoffs, a looming merger, the new president finally appearing. Marcus arrived dressed like he owned the world. New suit, silk tie, arrogant smile. He greeted several people with backslaps, empty laughs, and false promises. He sat in the front row and crossed his legs shamelessly. He had no idea what was about to unfold. Jamal was in the sound control room. Caleb, sitting next to the stage, held a small, folded sheet of paper in his hands. Gwen was not there. The hospital had decided to admit her for caution, although her condition worsened every day. Aisha walked onto the stage amidst murmurs. She wore a simple, unadorned black pantsuit. Her face was serene, not a drop of makeup, not a smile. She gripped the microphone firmly. "Good morning. I formally introduce myself to you. My name is Aisha Holloway Vance. I am the president of this company." There was a silence of astonishment. A few mouths dropped open. Others turned toward Marcus, whose face was now rigid as marble. A whisper spread like wildfire through the auditorium. Aisha continued without pause. "For the past few weeks, I have been observing the internal workings of the company, not as president, but as one of you. From the inside, I have walked your hallways, reviewed files, and listened to conversations. And what I discovered forces me to speak to you today with evidence, with truth, and with consequences." She signaled to Jamal. On the auditorium's giant screen, the first video appeared. Marcus negotiating with the illegal vendor, receiving envelopes, laughing while explaining how to inflate budgets. Then the recording of the threat to the board: "If they take me out of the game, we all go down." Later, a chain of emails demonstrating the use of false identities to justify non-existent overtime hours. Faces transformed as the evidence appeared. Some employees covered their mouths with their hands. Others desperately took notes. No one spoke. No one dared. Aisha walked across the stage as if each step were an act of liberation. "And it doesn't end there," she said firmly. Mr. Marcus Sterling was also reported for harassing multiple employees, complaints that were ignored out of fear, manipulation, or protection. "These people will have their voice today." She paused. She looked directly at Marcus, who was now white as paper, sweating, clenching his fists on his knees. "What you built with lies is collapsing today with the truth." Marcus abruptly stood up. "Don't do this to me, Aisha. Not here." Aisha didn't look away. "Not here? Where then? At home? In the bed where you lied? In the company where you stole?" Marcus rushed onto the stage, trying to snatch the microphone. Jamal intervened. 2 security agents grabbed Marcus by the arms. "You are nothing without me. I picked you up out of the gutter. I made you a woman." Caleb stood up from his seat. He walked slowly toward where Aisha and Marcus were. He held the folded sheet of paper between his fingers. He handed it to Marcus without saying anything. Then he returned to his place. Marcus, confused, opened the paper. He read in silence. "What you did hurt me. You called me weird. You said I was a nuisance. But I found someone who does believe in me. You don't deserve to destroy what she is building." Marcus let the letter fall. The room erupted in murmurs again. Some applauded, others recorded with their phones. Aisha took the microphone one last time. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of a clean, fair, and human place. And to achieve that, corruption must leave, cruelty must leave, and you, Marcus, must leave." The agents escorted him toward the exit. No one said goodbye. No one approached him. Chloe, in the back row, bowed her head. When Marcus disappeared through the door, Aisha looked at Chloe. "Before closing this assembly, there is something else that must be said." Chloe stood up. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She walked to the stage and took the microphone with icy fingers. "I'm pregnant, and everyone believed it was Marcus's. It is not." There was a collective gasp. "The father is Jamal." Aisha lowered her eyelids. There was no rage. There was no scandal. Only a knot slowly unraveling, as if she had already known. Jamal closed his eyes. Chloe handed the microphone back and left without looking at anyone. Her heels echoed like war drums on the auditorium floor. She was the last to leave. Upon exiting the building, Aisha saw that it was raining. The drops struck the asphalt violently. In the distance, a figure walked slowly in the rain. It was Marcus, alone, without an umbrella, his suit soaked and his gaze lost. Aisha followed him for a few yards. He sensed her closeness and stopped. "Did you come to mock me?" "No." "To tell me I deserve it?" "Not that either." Then Aisha stood in front of him. She looked him straight in the eye. It was never about revenge. It was about justice. Aisha left the phrase hanging in the air, like a door closing softly, without noise, but with an unforgettable weight. Marcus did not reply. He stood there in the rain, drenched, his arms down, his face broken, like an old building whose foundations had just been removed. Aisha did not look at him again. She turned around and walked away without haste, with the serenity of one who has finally buried a corpse she had been carrying on her back for years. The following days passed between heavy silences and determined actions. Aisha did not take refuge in triumph. She did not let herself be intoxicated by public glory. Instead, she sat alone in her office, drafted a letter, and called a meeting with the company's longest-serving members. "I'm going to establish a special program," she announced. "A support network for single mothers, children with disabilities, and vulnerable employees. It will be called the Ezra Project." The room fell silent. Some exchanged surprised glances. No one expected it. What everyone thought was that the new president would clean house, fire a few people, and focus on investments, not that she would create a social arm from the ashes of an internal war. Aisha didn't ask for their opinion. She gave only clear instructions. Automatic donations from her salary, funds designated for scholarships, expanded medical coverage, partnerships with local clinics. In less than 2 weeks, the Ezra Project had an office, an operational team, and dozens of beneficiaries. Caleb was appointed technical coordinator of the project. He earned it without asking. His dedication, precision, and humanity made him indispensable. Aisha gave him free rein to select personnel. The young man walked with more confidence. He no longer lowered his gaze so much. He spoke in longer sentences, though he still fell silent when he felt words weren't enough. One morning, while returning from the grocery store with a bag in his hand, Caleb stopped when he saw a man lying in the corner of an alley. He wore a torn coat, dirty hands, and messy hair. Upon getting closer, he recognized the face. It was Marcus. He was sitting on damp cardboard, trembling, his gaze lost. Caleb hesitated for an instant. Then he took a granola bar from his backpack and offered it. "I don't have any money," he said in his soft voice, "but this might help you." Marcus looked at him. For the first time in years, he truly looked at him, not with superiority, not with sarcasm. He looked at him like someone who recognizes they have hit rock bottom. He took the bar with trembling hands, then covered his face with both hands and began to cry. It wasn't a cry of rage. It was one that sounded like shame, defeat, and pure repentance. Caleb stayed there for a few seconds, then walked away in silence, without looking back. He never said anything about it to Aisha. Meanwhile, Chloe had resigned from the company. She left a terse letter with no complaints. She moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. She didn't ask for help. She didn't contact Jamal nor Aisha. She started working in a neighborhood bookstore, selling novels and school notebooks. She was 7 months pregnant. One Friday afternoon, Jamal went to see her. He carried a box of baby clothes. He knocked on the door. Chloe opened it and didn't seem surprised. "Hey," he said, looking down. "Come in if you want." Jamal entered. The place was modest but clean. It smelled of hot soup. In one corner, a rocking chair. On the wall, a framed photograph of an open field. "I didn't come to claim anything," he said. "I just wanted to know how you are." "I'm learning," she replied. "It wasn't easy, but I'm okay." "Do you need anything?" "No, I'm managing, and I don't want to depend on you. I don't want you to think I was looking for anything more than a mistake." Jamal lowered his head. "It never should have happened." "It did happen," Chloe said without resentment. "And from that night, this was born, a life. I'm not asking you to be a father if you don't want to, but I'm not going to hide her either." Jamal placed the box on the table. "I'm not ready. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm not going to disappear completely." Chloe nodded. There were no more words. There were no tears. It was the end of something that never quite started right. That night, Jamal went to see Aisha. She was in her office signing documents. She didn't look up when he entered. "Did you come to give me another news update?" Jamal sat across from her. His face was tense. "I didn't come to justify myself. I know I failed, that I failed you when you needed to trust the most." Aisha put down her pen. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Why?" "Because I was broken. Because I confused tenderness with escape. Because I was weak. And while you were confusing things, I was rebuilding myself piece by piece." "I know. And now what do you want?" "Forgiveness." "No. I just wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you that, despite everything, I admire you. And if I can ever earn a place back in your life, even as someone you don't hate, I'll be near." Aisha was silent, then nodded slightly. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I don't want to live hating either." Jamal smiled sadly. "That's more than I deserve." Before leaving, he placed a folder on the desk. "It's the proposal for the public hospital you mentioned. It's ready. It just needs your signature." Aisha glanced at it without saying anything. A week later, she called a press conference. She announced the donation of a multi-million-dollar sum to Metropolitan General Hospital. The funds would be used to remodel the pediatric area, acquire cutting-edge equipment, and create a specialized unit for rare childhood diseases. "This is not charity," she said at the end. "It is social justice. It is giving back what the world has taken from many of us, and I do it in the name of my son, Ezra." That same day, Ezra was transported to the airport along with a medical team. The treatment at the specialized facility on the East Coast was already coordinated. Aisha traveled with him. Caleb remained in charge of the project temporarily. Gwen, due to her delicate condition, stayed in the hospital. The treatment started well. During the first few days, Ezra responded positively. Aisha was with him for every session. She read him stories, sang to him, talked to him about the ocean. The boy smiled, albeit weakly, with that tenderness only children can give. But in the second week, things changed. An intense fever, unstable pulse, labored breathing. The doctors took urgent measures. The fibrosis had spread more than expected. The treatment was aggressive. His small, tired body wasn't coping well. Aisha spent the night awake. In the early morning, a doctor entered with a grave look. "We have to induce a medical coma. It's the only way to prevent further damage. If we don't, he could collapse." Aisha pressed her lips together, nodding with tears in her eyes. Before they sedated him, she leaned over him. "I love you, my life. You're going to rest for a little while. When you wake up, I'll be here, as always." Ezra looked at her tiredly, and with a thread of a voice asked, "Will you sing to me when I wake up?" Aisha nodded. "Yes, my love, I'll sing to you every single day if I have to." The boy closed his eyes. The monitor marked a slow, stable frequency. The doctors worked in silence. Aisha remained in the chair without moving, like a statue bleeding on the inside. Ezra had entered a coma, and a part of her had too. And so, while the world kept turning, Aisha felt her soul finally bleed without hiding, because justice is not celebrated. It is sustained, and sometimes it is paid for with what hurts the most. The room where Ezra slept in a coma was full of machines that breathed for him. The constant hum of the monitor, the slight beeping of every heartbeat, the artificial breath setting the pace of his struggle. Aisha didn't move. She had become accustomed to the pain of seeing her son motionless, not laughing, not uttering those few words that always brightened her day. Every second spent in that room was a constant decision not to break down. The medical staff was careful. They treated her with a mixture of respect and compassion, but no one could tell her what she most wanted to hear, that her son would return. Not with certainty, not with a guarantee, only with hope. And hope at that moment was a thin line that broke with every piece of bad news. That morning, while Aisha moistened Ezra's lips with a swab, she received a call from her lawyer. Marcus had been admitted to the county medical center with a severe case of pneumonia. They found him passed out in the street, malnourished, with hypothermia. No family member claimed him. No one knew where he lived. Aisha hung up without saying much. Hours passed. She thought about it. She thought about it again until she finally picked up a folder, a handwritten letter, and left the hospital where Ezra still slept with his soul suspended. The county medical center smelled of cheap disinfectant. The room where Marcus was recovering was at the end of a windowless hallway. He was awake but haggard. His beard was overgrown, his eyes sunken, his skin grayish. When he saw her enter, he clumsily sat up, with a hint of shame in his gaze. "What are you doing here?" Aisha didn't respond. She took a folded sheet of paper from her purse and placed it on the nightstand. "It's a letter from Ezra. He wrote it before our trip. He left it for you in case something happened." Marcus swallowed. "He's in a coma," she said without hesitation. "Fighting as always." Marcus said nothing. He took the paper with trembling fingers, opened it, and recognized his son's messy handwriting. As he read, tears began to slide down his cheeks uncontrollably. When he finished, he brought it to his chest as if it were a shield or a confession. Aisha watched him in silence. She didn't feel hatred, only a distant echo of compassion, of sorrow for what could never be. "What you did cannot be fixed," she said, without harshness. "But you can start over. Not with me, not with Ezra, with yourself." She left the room without waiting for an answer. That same afternoon, while the sky outside the hospital windows clouded over, the monitor next to Ezra's bed emitted a different sound, a slight change in rhythm. The doctors immediately entered. Aisha approached as if each step cost her soul, and then she saw it. His fingers moved, then his eyelids. Slowly, with tremendous effort, Ezra opened his eyes. "Mama," he whispered. It was as if the world had turned back on. Aisha fell to her knees next to the bed, crying, kissing his hands, repeating his name like a prayer. The doctor smiled discreetly. Ezra looked at her as if he knew he had returned from a long way just for her. "Will you sing to me?" he asked, his voice weak. "Of course, my life," Aisha said. "All my life, if you want." They returned home weeks later. The treatment had paid off. Ezra was stronger. He didn't run or shout like other children, but he was alive. And that was enough. Upon her return, Aisha was greeted as a symbol of strength, but she no longer wanted that position. She didn't want to be the woman on the pedestal. She had seen too much. She had felt too much. She publicly resigned from the presidency of Vance Holdings. She did it without applause, without long speeches. She simply said, "I didn't come to stay in power. I came to clean up a company, to protect a life, and I have done that." The board of directors accepted her decision with respect. Caleb was promoted to general coordinator of the Ezra Project. His intelligence, his sensitivity, his sense of duty made him perfect for leading the social division. Soon after, an international organization invited him to give a TED Talk at the company's headquarters. The day of the event, the auditorium was full. Caleb walked onto the stage with a notebook in his hand, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "When I was a kid, they told me I was weird, that I talked to myself too much, that I looked wrong, that I didn't fit in, and that hurt me a lot. Until I met someone who didn't ask me to fit in, who gave me space to be who I am. That person taught me that respect is not an option. It is a human necessity. Today, I am here to tell you something simple. When you respect someone, you are sowing the future, because where there is respect, the possibility of a better life is born." The audience applauded. Some were crying. Aisha, from the back row, felt something inside her heal too. Jamal, for his part, had returned to work as an independent consultant. He kept in touch with Aisha, but without intruding. Their relationship transformed into an amicable distance. Chloe gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Gabriel. Jamal visited him, cared for him, and held him with clumsy but sincere hands. Chloe never demanded anything from him. They raised the child with peace, without drama, without unnecessary titles. Gwen, however, didn't last long. Her already fragile body slowly faded. Aisha stayed with her until her last breath. On her deathbed, her mother took her hand and whispered, "Thank you for being stronger than me." Aisha could only tell her she loved her and watched her go with the peace she didn't have in life. Days after the funeral, while organizing her mother's belongings, she found a sealed box with a letter on top. It was addressed to her. She read it sitting by the window, the sun streaming through the curtains. "Dear daughter, if you are reading this, I am gone. I don't ask for forgiveness for what I hid. I only leave you my gratitude. Because you did what I could not, because you took the pain and turned it into something worthy. Because you chose love, even when you could have destroyed. Do not inherit my fear. Inherit your own light." Aisha closed the letter with trembling hands. She no longer needed more answers or explanations. What she had was enough. What remained was her life. She moved near the coast, to a simple house with large windows and a porch where Ezra played with his sensory toys. There she wrote, cooked, and walked. No one recognized her. No one applauded her, and that made her happy. One morning, Ezra brought her an old notebook. She opened it and saw a page written with clumsy but determined strokes. It was a journal entry. "You wrote this?" The boy nodded. Aisha read aloud. "My mom is not a lazy, overweight woman. She is the bravest woman in the world." Her voice broke. She hugged him tightly, tenderly, with everything she had. And she knew in that instant that everything had been worth it, because forgiveness is not forgetting. It is freeing yourself from the person who hurt you. And so, in a corner of the world, where the ocean sings instead of screams, where silence does not hurt but embraces, the light was finally born. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.